John Richards wakes up early to the distant hum of engines and spots HOA workers setting up a picnic area on the edge of his land, under the old oak tree where he once proposed to his late wife. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains of the old farmhouse, streaking across the worn wooden floor. A low mechanical buzz echoed from the tree line beyond the southern field. John set his coffee cup on the windowsill and squinted toward the source. Beneath the spreading limbs of the ancient oak tree, one that had stood since before his grandfather's time, a group of workers were hauling benches and lumber from a white trailer. He blinked slowly, the kind of blink that carried weight rather than surprise. Years ago, on a morning just like this, his grandfather had stood on that porch and told him, "Some land remembers, some land forgives, but it never forgets who owns it." That oak had watched the town rise, change, and forget its roots. John took a slow sip of coffee, his steps deliberate as he stepped out onto the porch. He wore the same denim shirt he always did, sleeves rolled, collar faded. The air was thick with dew and the scent of fresh-cut grass. As he descended the creaking steps, he passed Mary's wind chimes, a cluster of rusted spoons that still tinkled in the light breeze. They had made them together one summer, long ago. He crossed the field at a steady pace, boots brushing against tall grass. The workers didn't notice him until he was near. One young man, wearing a neon vest and a sun-faded ball cap, looked up from where he was placing screws into a metal sign. "Morning," John offered with a nod. "Hey there," the man replied, friendly but cautious. "You must live up at the old farmhouse." "I do. Name's John Richards." "Oh, Darrell, I'm just helping with the installation today. This here's for the HOA's new Community Comfort Zone." John's eyes flicked to the sign. "Sunny Hills, HOA. Picnic area. Members only." He nodded once. "Interesting spot to put it, far from the houses." Darrell chuckled nervously. "Yeah, well, Miss Whitmore picked the location, said it had atmosphere. She should be along soon if you want to talk details." As if summoned, a sleek white SUV crunched along the gravel path and parked just off the edge of the road. Karen Whitmore stepped out, dressed in cream-colored slacks, a pink-collared shirt, and sunglasses too large for her face. She moved with the brisk efficiency of someone who was used to people making room. "Good morning," she said, voice clipped and polished. "We're ahead of schedule, Darrell. Love to see it." Her eyes fell on John, and for a beat her expression didn't register recognition. Then a smile, polite but paper-thin. "Mr. Richards, is it? Lovely day." John returned the smile, smaller but genuine. "I suppose it is, though I hadn't realized there was an HOA initiative this far down the boundary line." Karen's tone was warm, but her eyes were appraising. "Oh, we recently updated the maps. This space falls under common use acreage according to the revised layout filed last year. We're turning underutilized zones into functional areas." John nodded slowly. "Curious. My grandfather's deed has this southern field clearly marked as part of the family parcel. Been that way since long before there was a Sunny Hills HOA." Karen's smile didn't waver. "Perhaps there was a misrecording, or maybe the documents weren't updated properly. You'd be surprised how often these things slip through the cracks." "I'll have to take another look at the records," he said, "just to be sure." "Of course," she said brightly. "We're happy to provide all the documentation you need. It's all above board. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have calls to make." Without waiting for his reply, she turned and strode off, already dialing on her phone. Darrell offered a small shrug and bent back to work. John lingered a moment longer, eyes on the oak. The bench they were installing would rest exactly where he had knelt beside Mary 40 years ago, fumbling with a ring in his pocket and trying to remember the words he'd rehearsed. She had laughed when he finally got them out, kissed him, and said yes before he even finished asking. That night, as dusk wrapped itself around the old farmhouse, John climbed the narrow attic stairs with a flashlight and dust mask. The air was thick with years of undisturbed memory. He knelt beside the low wooden chest under the eaves, the one marked Southern Field. The latch groaned as it opened. Inside were papers browned at the edges, their corners curled, still held together by care rather than staples. He pulled out the parcel deed, handwritten and notarized in 1957, and unfolded the survey map marked in his grandfather's script. Beside them lay a faded photograph. He and Mary, arms around each other, grinning beneath the oak tree. A small cloth pouch nestled beside it. Inside, a tarnished key. He held it in his palm a long time before standing. The house creaked as he made his way down. Outside, crickets had begun their nightly rhythm. He stepped into the night air, stars dimmed by the subtle glow of the town a few hills away. Crossing the yard with slow steps, he reached the old barn and opened the side door. Inside, wooden beams loomed like ribs above him. He climbed a ladder to the hayloft, turned toward a familiar hollow in the far post oak that framed the barn window, and pressed his hand along the inner ledge. The bark shifted under his fingers, and a small camera, dusty but intact, slid into view. He checked the red light. Still recording. John steps outside, unlocks the barn, and retrieves an old hunting camera mounted in a hollow oak. Still recording. At the Cedar County Clerk's office, John discovers a land use shift filed in 2016, reclassifying 2 acres of his family land as shared community space. The building hadn't changed much since John's childhood. Same creaky floor tiles, same dust-lined windows half covered with faded county notices. The clerk's desk sat behind a cloudy plexiglass shield, cluttered with rubber stamps and folders with broken tabs. John waited patiently as a young assistant with a tired expression clicked through the county database. "Looking for something specific, Mr. Richards?" she asked, pushing her glasses up with the back of her hand. "I'm trying to reconcile some property lines. The Sunny Hills HOA installed something on the southern edge of my land, said it was common-use space." The assistant nodded slowly. "That'd be parcel 241B, I think. Let me pull up the filings." She tapped a few keys, squinting at the screen. "Okay. Looks like... The original deed has it as part of the Richards estate. But there's an amendment. Reclassification filed in 2016. 2-acre strip changed to community access." John leaned forward. "Who filed it?" "Says here it was submitted by the HOA Planning Committee, signed by Karen Whitmore. It was approved by the county board that same month." He didn't respond immediately, just stared at the screen. The strip in question wasn't just land, it was legacy, memory, and someone had redrawn the lines without so much as a phone call. "Can I get a printout of everything tied to that change?" "Sure," she said, already clicking through menus. "Might take a minute. The system's kind of slow." As she worked, John's mind wandered to a moment years ago, on a porch very much like his own, when Mary had stood beside him, arms crossed, watching a neighbor's barn get torn down for a new gas station. "If you don't speak up for what matters," she had said, "someone else will speak over you." He folded the memory gently and slipped it into his resolve. 30 minutes later, armed with a manila folder full of documents, John drove the old Ford down a 2-lane road flanked by dogwoods and mailboxes. The sun had climbed higher, heating the dashboard through cracked glass. He turned into a gravel drive marked by a rusted tin sign that read, "Fulton, Legal and Notary, Retired." Walt Fulton's place looked like time had stopped there in 1982. A carved wooden eagle perched above the door. Inside, the office smelled faintly of lemon polish and pipe tobacco. Law books lined the walls, sharing space with taxidermy fish and yellowed newspaper clippings. "John Richards," Walt greeted, standing behind a desk that leaned slightly to one side. "Heard you were back in town." "Not for long," John replied, shaking the man's hand. "Unless something changes." "Something always does," Walt said with a small smile. "What brings you here?" John placed the folder on the desk and opened it carefully. "Take a look." Walt settled into his chair, adjusting his bifocals. He spread out the pages, flipping between old survey maps and the 2016 adjustment. This clause here," he muttered, pointing. "It's from 1957. Use of the southern boundary reserved in perpetuity to the Richards family. That's ironclad language. But the county approved the shift." "Yeah, well, they might have approved it, but that doesn't make it legal. If it was based on bad info or no info, there's a case, especially if you never signed off." "I didn't. Neither did my grandfather." Walt sat back, tapping the edge of the table. "Then it's fraud, or close enough to smell like it. But don't go storming into HOA meetings just yet. Let them think they've won. Let them keep digging." John nodded. He understood patience. Farming taught that better than most things. "Something else," he added. "I've got an old hunting camera. Still works. Got some footage you might want to see." That evening, John climbed the ladder in the barn and retrieved the SD card. The camera was older, but it recorded in clean black and white. He transferred the video to his old laptop, the screen flickering slightly as the footage loaded. The camera had caught everything: the arrival of the white trailer, Darrell hauling benches, and then Karen, in her pastel blouse, pointing forcefully toward the oak tree. "Put the sign there," she was saying to someone off frame. "He won't fight us. He's too old to care." John didn't react, not outwardly. He paused the video and let the image hang in silence. The inside of the farmhouse seemed to inhale and hold its breath. Later that night, after the sun had gone and the fireflies blinked across the field, John sat alone on the porch. The air smelled faintly of rain to come. He cradled his coffee mug, lukewarm now, hands resting on his knees. The oak tree swayed gently in the dark, its silhouette barely visible against the sky. "Mary," he said quietly, "I think it's time." HOA announces a grand, summer welcome BBQ at the new picnic area, with Karen smiling proudly in the town newspaper. The clatter of dishes and the low hum of morning chatter filled the Maple Fork diner as sunlight filtered through the blinds, painting warm lines across the floor. Tucker shuffled between booths with practiced grace, refilling mugs before anyone had to ask. When he reached John Richards' corner seat, his seat always by the window, he carried more than just a fresh pot of coffee. "Morning, Mr. Richards," Tucker said, sliding a folded newspaper beside the syrup caddy. "Looks like your HOA's making the front page again." John glanced down and unfolded the local rag. There she was, Karen Whitmore, all pearls and teeth, beaming beneath a banner that read, "Sunny Hills, HOA, to host summer welcome. BBQ at new community picnic area." Her hands were folded just below the sign John hadn't authorized, under the tree he hadn't given up. "She really wants a headline," he muttered, setting the paper aside. "Let's give her one." Tucker raised an eyebrow but said nothing, just poured the coffee and moved on. After breakfast, John stopped by the post office to check for a package of replacement batteries he'd ordered for the trail camera. While he waited in line, he overheard two women near the community board whispering, "Did you see your HOA dues this month? Mine went up again." "And for what? A picnic bench and some bushes?" "Karen said it was a beautification effort. I didn't ask for my money to be beautified." John didn't interrupt, but the whispers weren't isolated anymore. The murmur was spreading, low and steady, like creek water rising after days of rain. That afternoon, as the sun baked the barn roof and the cicadas started their slow buzz, a knock came at John's porch. Emma and Brian Morales stood together, both young, tidy, and clearly uncomfortable. "Sorry to bother you," Emma said, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "We live on Wisteria Lane, part of the newer development." "I remember," John said. "Your dog chased my chickens last fall." Brian chuckled. "He still tries." Emma stepped forward. "We got an HOA letter this week. Extra charges, labeled seasonal infrastructure maintenance. No explanation. And when we asked Karen, she said it was standard." "We didn't think it was," Brian added. "We know you've been dealing with something, with the picnic area." John nodded, not saying much, just listening. Emma took a breath. "Have you ever seen anything strange in their accounting? Like misused funds?" John leaned against the railing. "Not yet, but I'm starting to look." That evening, under the purple smear of sunset, John attended a scheduled HOA board meeting, quietly, seated in the back. He said nothing during the presentations. Karen waxed poetic about community renewal and shared spaces that unify neighbors. Her voice lifted like she was running for office. When the meeting adjourned, board members began gathering their papers. One of them, Gerald Knox, the treasurer, lingered by the door, fiddling with his briefcase. He looked over his shoulder and stepped closer to John. "I'm not supposed to do this," Gerald mumbled, slipping a small flash drive into John's palm. "But you should see this. Just be careful." Before John could reply, Gerald was already gone, shoulders hunched. Back at the farmhouse, John booted up his laptop and opened the files. Rows of spreadsheets greeted him: dues, disbursements, contractor payments. One entry stood out: a $200,000 loan taken out 3 months ago, secured by Community Parcel 2B. He checked the survey. 2B was the same land under the oak tree. The HOA had mortgaged disputed land. He sat still for a long time, breathing evenly. Then he opened his desk drawer, pulled out a sheet of letterhead, and began drafting. By morning, certified letters had been sent to every member of the HOA board, citing potential title disputes and demanding immediate suspension of all activity on the parcel pending legal review. He didn't call anyone. He didn't warn Karen. He let the letters speak. That evening, the wind picked up, rustling the porch screen and bringing in the smell of honeysuckle from the edge of the woods. The sun dipped behind the treetops, casting long shadows across the quiet fields. As he stepped out to check the mailbox, he found only one item waiting for him: a plain white envelope, no return address, resting against the back wall. Inside, a single sheet of lined paper, written in neat, deliberate print: "You're not alone." A white envelope stamped HOA Legal Counsel arrives in John's mailbox, demanding he surrender access rights or face civil litigation. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and carried an official tone, even before he read the bold black lettering across its front. From the office of HOA Legal Counsel sat neatly beneath the Sunny Hills emblem, a stylized sun rising over generic rooftops. John held it for a moment, thumb brushing the edge before he opened it. The letter inside was dense with legal jargon, but its message was simple: vacate or face court. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. On his way to the truck, he passed the oak tree. The grass was trampled where picnic tables had been arranged in a half-moon. Yellow tape fluttered against the wind, and a paper sign reading "Reserved for event use" had been stapled onto the bark. He paused at the base of the tree, hand resting on its ridged surface. In his mind, a younger Mary laughed, barefoot on the blanket, hair tied back with a red ribbon, teasing him for packing too many sandwiches. The spot where she'd kissed him was now the place Karen's banner had been strung. He closed his eyes. Not anymore. Walt Fulton's office was quiet except for the rhythmic ticking of an old metronome on the corner shelf. The retired attorney was already hunched over a desk, reading the HOA letter under a green-shaded lamp. "Well," Walt said, placing his glasses on the desk. They're moving fast, probably hoping to spook you before the barbecue." "They picked the wrong man," John said simply. Walt nodded and pulled a file from the nearby cabinet. Inside were copies of the Richards estate deed and the original covenant filed in 1971. He laid one out and pointed. "Use of the southern boundary reserved in perpetuity to the Richards family." "That's strong. We'll start with a cease and desist. You deliver it calmly." As Walt printed documents, John reached into his bag and removed a small stack of folded letters. "I've got a delivery to make myself." Later that afternoon, he stopped at homes near the HOA zone, those on the edge of Karen's reach. To each porch, he left an envelope. Inside were scanned images of the original survey, a brief explanation of his family's title rights, and a small QR code. When scanned, it opened a video clip. Karen Whitmore, arms crossed, instructing the workers to install the picnic sign, followed by her now infamous line, "He won't fight us. He's too old to care." At the Maple Fork Diner, John ordered coffee and slid into his usual booth. Tucker didn't say much, just offered a quiet nod and left the pot nearby. From the kitchen came the muffled voice of the radio news anchor reporting on community events. Sunny Hills, HOA's summer welcome. BBQ is still scheduled for next week, despite questions over the property's legal status. John sipped slowly. Karen was losing control of the narrative. By dusk, the porch light glowed warmly against the farmhouse siding. John stood at the kitchen counter, letters strewn across the table, when Gerald Knox knocked, twice, quick and soft. Gerald stepped in without waiting to be invited. His tie was crooked, his face pale. "She's scrambling," he whispered, clutching a thumb drive. 3 board members skipped the emergency session she called. "She's threatening to fine them." John opened the drawer and passed Gerald a copy of the cease and desist. "They'll want to read this." Gerald nodded, then hesitated. "There's more. Karen's been routing payments to her daughter's firm. Consulting, landscaping, even legal prep. It's all in here." He handed over the drive, then left just as quietly as he came. As night blanketed Cedar Hollow, John uploaded the video clip to the community's Facebook group, anonymously. No commentary, no captions, just the footage. By midnight, the post had over 300 shares. Comments rolled in. "She said what? This is our money she's playing with. My grandma paid dues for 20 years. Karen's voice rang louder now than she intended, and not in the way she had planned. Sometime past midnight, headlights crept along the edge of John's drive. He stood behind the curtain and watched. A white SUV slowed near the gate. For a moment, it idled, brake lights glowing like low coals in the dark. Then it pulled away. Karen drives by John's home in the dark, slows down at the gate, then speeds off. The HOA proceeds with the summer welcome BBQ anyway, banners waving, music blaring, but fewer residents show up than expected. John stood on his porch with a coffee cup warming both hands. The distant hum of generators, upbeat music, and a sputtering bubble machine reached him faintly from the oak grove below. Paper lanterns swayed above rows of picnic tables, and a cotton candy vendor, brought in from the next county, sat up beside a face painting station with no customers. He watched in silence. It's not a party if no one believes in it. Down at the site, Karen Whitmore stood on a portable riser in a pale blue sundress, microphone in hand, smile drawn tight across her face. She welcomed the crowd, what little there was of it, with forced cheer. It's a beautiful day in Sunny Hills, a day to celebrate our togetherness, our shared vision, our community spirit. A few claps scattered through the crowd. Children shifted impatiently. Parents glanced at their watches. In a corner, Emma and Brian Morales moved from table to table, handing out neatly folded flyers. They spoke quietly, never confrontational. The papers displayed side-by-side maps, the original deed lines, and the HOA's adjusted layout, along with a highlighted quote from the 1971 covenant. Use of the southern boundary reserved in perpetuity to the Richards family. Some residents tucked them into their pockets without reading. Others opened them on the spot, eyebrows furrowing. A few turned and stared toward the oak tree, toward the house that overlooked them all. Janine Sims from the Cedar Hollow Chronicle arrived with a small camera crew and a yellow legal pad. She greeted Karen between staged photos, then asked flatly, "Were you aware the picnic site was privately owned when construction began?" Karen blinked. The land was listed under community use in the most recent revision. If there's confusion, I'll clarify it with legal counsel. Was Mr. Richards ever contacted? He had every opportunity to attend our meetings. Would you like to comment on the cease and desist letter or the footage of you instructing workers to install signage? Karen's smile faltered. No further questions. Across the field, a group of teenagers filming TikToks with their phones caught her sharp retreat. One girl zoomed in just as Karen turned to an aide and snapped, "Next time, vet the press." By the time the hot dogs were cold, half the guests had wandered off. The rest huddled in small groups, talking in hushed tones that carried further than they realized. At the diner the next morning, John slid into his booth, nodding at Tucker, who poured without asking. "Big event yesterday," Tucker said mildly. "Looked like it," John replied. Karen left in the middle, said something about a smear campaign. "People seemed quiet on their way back," John offered. Tucker chuckled. "Yeah, like they just left a church service they didn't agree with." The bell above the door jingled. Gerald Knox shuffled in, tie askew, eyes tired. He slid into the seat across from John. "She's spiraling," he said under his breath. "The board's fracturing. I've had 2 members ask how to dissolve a committee. One's looking into stepping down." "Good men don't stay quiet forever," John said. Gerald nodded, pulling a paper from his folder. "Janine wants quotes from former board members. She's not letting this drop." That evening, with the porch light buzzing faintly overhead, John was locking the screen door when headlights approached. A rust-colored sedan rolled into the driveway, and Janine stepped out, still in her blazer from the BBQ, recorder clipped to her belt. "I thought you might want to see tomorrow's headline," she said, holding out a folded print proof. The headline read, "Land Lies, Sunny Hills, HOA accused of overreach and financial misconduct." Janine knocks on John's door that night. The Chronicle is running a front-page story. You'll want to read it. Cedar Hollow High's auditorium is packed for the emergency HOA town hall. Karen walks into icy silence. The chatter fell quiet the moment she entered. Karen Whitmore, in a tailored navy dress and heels that clicked across the tile, paused just inside the doorway of the high school auditorium. Rows of folding chairs were filled to the edge. More than 100 neighbors, their faces turned toward the front, most of them unreadable. The silence was not hostile, but neither was it warm. She walked the aisle alone. John sat near the back, flanked by Emma and Brian on one side, Mrs. Bellamy on the other. He'd chosen a simple collared shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. His hands rested on his knees, still, calm, watchful. At the front of the stage, a large framed photo stood on an easel, one of the town's original founder images. It showed 6 men standing in front of an old barn, the land wild behind them. One of them was John's grandfather, George Richards, hat in hand, smiling beneath the caption, "The land makes the town, not the titles." Walt Fulton stepped up first. Though retired, he carried the same steadiness he always had. He laid 3 documents on the presentation table, the original survey, the 1971 covenant, and the deed to the Richards estate. Each was scanned, enlarged, and projected on the wall behind him. "These records," Walt said in his measured voice, "show that the southern parcel, commonly referred to as the Oak Grove, has never been legally transferred from the Richards family. Furthermore, the covenant signed in 1971 reserves its use permanently to the family and their heirs. A quiet stir ran through the crowd. Next, Janine Sims from the Chronicle took the podium. Her tone was professional but firm. Over the past 2 weeks, our investigation has uncovered multiple financial transactions involving HOA funds. These include payments to family-owned entities without proper board approval and a mortgage loan using contested land as collateral. All records are now available to the public and were verified through county documents. She didn't name Karen directly. She didn't have to. Gerald Knox stood slowly, his shoulders squared. As treasurer, I take responsibility for not speaking sooner. Today, I formally resign from the board, and I urge the town to conduct a formal review of how this HOA has operated under current leadership. Karen stepped forward at last. Her voice was cool, but cracks lined the edges. This is a coordinated attack on a woman who gave her time and energy to build something special. Some of these accusations are based on misunderstandings, and some are exaggerated. She waited for reaction. None came. She looked out over the crowd, seeking something, support, recognition, perhaps the old certainty that people would follow her lead. But the faces looking back were still unmoved. A town mediator, seated at the center table, cleared his throat. By vote of the interim board and per community bylaws, the current HOA structure is hereby dissolved. A restructured committee will be formed, pending resident nominations and public oversight. The air shifted, as if an invisible weight had lifted. Then John rose. He made no show of it, no pause for effect, just walked forward, steady and quiet, and faced the room. "My grandfather planted that oak tree," he said. "And when I was a boy, he told me it'd outlive us all, as long as we didn't forget who it belonged to." He looked around. "That land was my family's, but I'll share it, if we all agree to protect it." A murmur ran through the room, not loud, not dramatic. Just people exhaling, nodding, understanding. Outside, the sky was turning amber with dusk. John returned home without fanfare, his boots crunching across the gravel. He made himself a cup of coffee and carried it to the grove. Children were there already, Emma and Brian's daughter chasing a butterfly, someone's golden retriever rolling in the grass. A new sign stood at the grove's edge, freshly carved, warm-toned wood catching the last light of day. Richard's Grove, protected for all. He sat beneath the oak, back against its trunk, coffee in hand. The breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and for a moment he imagined he heard Mary's laugh, caught in the wind, still echoing after all this time. As the summer dusk settles over Cedar Hollow, the grove stands quiet, not in defeat, but in peace. What began as a quiet man's stand for his family's land became a reminder that roots, once planted deep, can hold strong against even the fiercest storms. In defending a piece of earth, John helped his neighbors rediscover something larger, the strength of a community that listens, questions, and stands together. Justice didn't arrive with shouts or lawsuits, but with steady hands and unshakable truth. Some land holds more than soil. It holds memory, promise, and the quiet courage to do what's right.